My story is so much more than just my addiction story. When we realize we have a unique gift that by sharing it with others, we are also lifted. We're here to lift each other up, not pull each other down. We're all rising from the ashes of something. We've all been through struggles. And by humanizing that, and we just see each other in this more like empathetic, loving way. And it's that love that I think is the real power, you know?
Amen, brother. Like, I just have goosebumps.
I'm Neal Tricarico, and my wife, Samara, and I are grateful you're here for this unique podcast experience. We share the story of the loss of our son, Anthony, the movement that has grown out of the unimaginable grief, and the legacy we're building so that no teen ever feels this alone or lost again. We're here to give parents the resources to support their children and the communities around them, because it truly takes a tribe.
The Endurant Show is a testament to post-traumatic growth, the belief that even in the aftermath of deep grief, healing and purpose can emerge. It's a space for truth, connection, and hope, where real conversations around mental health, autism, suicide prevention, and resilience take center stage.
Healing doesn't always start with a diagnosis. It often starts with being heard, and we've created a community just for that.
Each episode, we sit down with teens, parents, experts, and advocates to share honest stories, tools, and resources. Because we believe that awareness is the cure, you don't have to hold your grief alone, and you don't have to run from it.
Through these conversations, we're building a community grounded in understanding, support, and lasting change. If you've ever felt alone, unheard, or unsure of how to keep going, this space is for you. The Endurant Show was born from one driving question: what if we could transform our pain into a lifeline for someone else? Today, we explore that question with Scott Strode. Once struggling with trauma and addiction, Scott founded the Phoenix, a nationwide movement combining physical activity, community, and purpose-driven recovery. Through climbing, running, and shared rituals, the Phoenix has empowered over 500,000 people and aims to reach 10 million people by 2030. Scott is the author of Rise, Recover, Thrive, and has shared his story on People magazine, The Today Show, and The Kelly Clarkson Show. He also leads 1 Million Strong, an initiative of the Phoenix in partnership with the Stand Together Foundation, creating sober, inclusive spaces in the music industry. Scott's mission is to transform recovery into an inclusive, empowering journey, one that integrates movement, community, and purpose to help people rebuild resilience and leave a lasting impact. In this episode, we'll speak with Scott about his incredible journey and explore how embodied practices can turn grief and trauma into possibility. Well, this is such a tremendous treat for Samara and me. Not only that we have this expert here with us, but Scott personally has been a mentor for us on this journey and helping us navigate and close the gaps on the paths that we need to start this most important nonprofit. And we're just so personally very grateful to have you, Scott. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Great to be here chatting with you today.
Awesome. It means a lot. So your journey from trauma and addiction to founding the Phoenix is incredible. Can you share the moment with us that inspired you to turn your personal struggle into this movement?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there was like one clear moment other than I started to realize that because when I got into recovery, I started pursuing athletics, I started racing triathlon, I started climbing, and I didn't obviously know this at the time, but every time I get to the top of that climb or cross that finish line, I'd heal some of the self-esteem wounds, which were really the root cause, I think, of my addiction from that early childhood trauma. And I started to become more aware of friends of mine in recovery really struggling and solely identifying as their addiction story. And that kind of hurt my heart, you know. I just thought, like, we got to get some of these folks out, like climbing with us and riding bikes and doing all these other things. And, I had a friend in recovery who climbed with me. And I had another friend who I climbed with, who's a clinical social worker. And we put our heads together and we thought, how do we get more people out here doing this with us? And that was the beginning of the Phoenix. The Phoenix was my story before we had a name and a logo and an organization and all that stuff. But we just started sharing that opportunity to rise from the ashes with a lot of other people.
It resonates on so many levels, and also on a personal level, because rock climbing was so important to Anthony, and it's one of his happy places. So how did those early experiences shape the Phoenix's approach, particularly integrating movement and exercise, ritual, and also the importance of community?
Yeah, I think the community side of it was sort of more like covert, like I think and the activities were so obviously transformational. You actually stand on a summit of a mountain, and I love to say that you can see things in yourself up there that you can't see from down here. And that sense of awe that you experience in those places, whether it's, surfing and you paddle out past the break and you're just sitting on your board and it's late in the day and the sun's gone down and it's just beautiful. Or it's standing on top of that mountain, or it's just that bike ride where you're riding up a canyon somewhere and you just hear your pedals and you're sort of in that meditative state. There's a sense of awe there. But what I started to learn is that the real awe was like what you shared with others in those places, is seeing them accomplish the things that were so difficult that you push through. It's that fist bump at the top of that climb was so impactful, and so bonding with that person that I thought we just have to share this with other people.
The strength of the community coming through that shared experience of overcoming obstacles together, and maybe recognizing something in others that's also within yourself. Just what a beautiful organic development of connection. Why do you think language is so important in recovery, like moving away from the labels of addict and disorder and empowering people in their healing?
I think the language is crucial, right? Like, I mean, we identify ourselves with language. We can take on language as who we are, and there's something, I think, something around mental health related things or substance use related things, for some reason we see it differently. If somebody's struggling with cancer, we don't refer to them as a cancer person, right? But we refer to people as addicts, as mentally ill. Like we sort of give the person the identity of this thing. And as opposed to sort of person first language, or this idea that, I struggled with substance use, but I don't refer to myself as an addict, and this is tricky, because in the recovery community, sometimes in this surrendering to this understanding about our addiction, we can step into a strength and sort of asking for help, right? Being humbled and opening up and asking for that help. But I also think there's a chance that we start bonding around that identity in a way that keeps us in that place. It's hard to move forward from if I just think of myself as an addict. It's hard for me to be more than my addiction story if I think of that as my story. My story is so much more than just my addiction story.
Right.
My addiction story certainly was some dark chapters in that sort of book of my life, but in recovery, I get to write the new ones. And to write those new ones, I can't be stuck in the ones that came before. So
Right.
I think that identity piece is powerful. And it also happens at the Phoenix when you think of yourself as a climber or a cyclist or a runner or a yogi or whatever it is, an artist or photographer, you start to fill in that void with this like positive identity, this something that's sort of reinforcing about who you can be in life.
Hmm. Yeah, it's such an important question too. I know in our meditation practice, we ask ourselves, "Who am I?" And finding that sense of identity. I really like how you capture that, you know, addiction or the problem, if you will, might have just been a chapter. It doesn't have to define who you are for the rest of your life. So that's really powerful.
Yeah, I resonated with it so deeply because in the mental health community, right, whether it's autism spectrum disorder, ADHD, whatever it is, it's a disorder, and that disorder is defining somebody, right? And if they have a disorder, then inevitably something is wrong with them, and they need treatment to be fixed or become normalized. But in the sense that, you know, at the same time acknowledging, I'm an addict, or acknowledging that I'm high functioning or that I have ADH, it's saying, hey, this is where my difference is. I have brown eyes and you have green eyes, and that we can associate and take ownership and thrive in that difference, and yet still not be defined by it. And it really makes me think about furthering the conversation that we were having a few calls ago together, when we were sharing, for Samara and I, we're so blessed to be in these communities, in these support groups, survivors of loss of children, or parents of who have lost children to suicide. And they're beautiful in the sense that no one can relate to Samara and I like another parent who's lost a child or lost a child in this way. That bond is like no other. And yet at the same time, often when we're in these groups, the majority of time is spent in the suffering, sharing about the suffering. And while we can all empathize with that suffering, and that is our connection, sometimes often we leave those meetings feeling pulled to suffering and less towards growth. You shared with us before about shifting from bonding around the pain body to bonding around the strength body. And why is that shift so critical? And what happens when we start defining ourselves by strength rather than suffering?
Yeah, I think that, that pain body concept that Eckhart Tolle talks about, in his writings, it really landed for me because I think as humans, we want to be in a tribe, in a pack, in a community, and we feel comfortable and held and supported in those spaces. And I think when what brought you to that space is something as painful as loss of a loved one, or the impact of your addiction on your life and the dreams that stripped away from you, and it you're just you find some solace in being with people who understand how hard it was to get to where you are today, which feels good. It feels good to bond with people like that. You feel like I am not alone, that my reaction to this is not, I'm not broken or deficient. These are just, everybody else is feeling the same way. And their emotions kind of resonate with me, but we can get stuck there. And then we get into a practice of coming together around that. And I think that when you're stuck in that place, it's hard to look forward out to the horizon and start to dream of what's possible next. And it doesn't mean we're leaving that pain there, right? We all know that grief is not a linear process, right? But by thinking about how do we stand shoulder to shoulder and take this adversity that we face together and build something different in the world, using this collective energy of us all coming together around it. And I think that's what happens at the Phoenix. You come in and you've been defined by your addiction for so long but the person at the climbing wall, sort of helps you tie into the harness and is like, all right, let's get up the climbing wall. And
Mhm.
and you're thinking about the sanctions from the drug court judge and what the probation officer said, and who knows what else is like weighing on your shoulders. But they're like, dude, grab the green handhold, and get your right foot out, or you're gonna fall off that thing, and move through that quick because you can't hold on to that small hold forever, and all of
Mhm.
a sudden all that other stuff melts away, and you're starting to think of what's my next handhold, what's my next move. That translates into how do I climb that harder route? That translates into I'm a climber, I'm a climbing partner, I'm there for my partner, and we do hard things together and we get through it, and I can get through these other hard things.
Mhm.
And that strength body is something that really lifts us, I think.
Mhm. And it's embodying transformation, which it sounds like what you've described is inspiring hope, then, which is such an important component. I think something that we saw was missing with Anthony. I mean, he was a climber too, but I think he got to a point where maybe didn't have the community like what you're talking about, and in that, you see someone else that inspires you, you do it, you feel it, okay, I can do this, I can inspire someone else, and that community provides hope, which is such an important feeling and emotion for all of us to experience, to know that there is possibility, that there are solutions, that there are ways to move forward, physically and emotionally, and in your life, having that physical experience translate into something more meaningful for your whole life. I think it's so valuable and important what you're doing and the space that you're providing.
Just wanted to comment on the hope piece. Is I just love that you're lifting that up, like I think that when you come together in a community that accepts and loves you for all the parts of you, right? Even the tough stuff that you've been through, or the stuff that you might carry shame around, or whatever it is, you get to um, let that stuff melt away, and just realize that we're all sort of perfectly imperfect, right? That we all
Mhm.
are just humans on this journey. We're all rising from the ashes of something. We've all been through struggles, and by humanizing that, and we just see each other in this more like empathetic, loving way. And it's that love that I think is the real power.
Yeah. Oh man. Amen, brother. Like I just have goosebumps, and just the dialogue between the two of you. What I feel is hope and growth. And I love the approach that you're taking at the Phoenix. Samara and I, uh, Samara is sober for 24 years. We met in recovery. We understand sobriety, and not to take anything away from the 12-step program. The 12-step program saved our lives. And there became a point in our journey where we started to realize, like, yes, it's about life and death, but at the same time, if we're always afraid of picking up that next drink or that next drug and it might kill us, we're stuck in that, not dying. But through what you're bringing to bear at the Phoenix, and coming up with movement and ritual and love and connection and strategy around rock climbing, for instance, you start to plant the seeds of where do we want to go from here. We were so blessed that when we moved to San Diego and began working at the Chopra Center, Deepak Chopra posed that question to us. He said, I understand, and I'm so happy you both are sober, because we were sharing with him, we were having a hard time finding the community that we had found in San Francisco. And San Francisco is beautiful. Our sponsors encouraged us, hey, you guys, we still party. We just don't partake in drugs or alcohol anymore. And that's how the community was. But when we got down to San Diego, it was more, we were going to hospitals, and it was more like forward appointed. And he was asking us, like, well, what are you doing to grow? Now that maybe you're not as risk of dying 5 years later, what are you doing to grow? Because that's going to catapult you more than anything. And it just resonates, that thread that you two are sharing, and the work that you're doing at the Phoenix to help in that way.
That's great. I love that idea of the growth that, it's I think of it as sort of making new memories, you know?
Mhm.
It's like I have a lot of them from my addiction story that are pretty dark and pretty,
Mhm.
you know, full of pain and shame. But by creating some new ones, we start to fill the workbench in front of us with those, and instead of those old ones, you know?
Mhm.
And that's that growth in my mind, is like, you start to realize that, yes, this is part of your story, but it's not your whole story. And that you have the pen to write the next chapters, you know? It's like, and so get to writing. Like, what do you want them to be? And
Right.
how do you want to use what you've experienced and learned to be of service to others, which I think ultimately helps lead us towards a life of purpose too.
Well, it's such a powerful transition. We wanted to talk about transforming that pain into purpose. And before we move to those questions, I'm struck with what you've said just in recent weeks and months, the work that we've been doing with teens, both in our community and for the Teen Voices portion of this show. And it's so powerful to meet with them in person in these different panels and have them share their stories of trauma or bullying or shaming or even worse yet, assault and things like that. But coming together in this community and finding such a place of safety and vulnerability. And now to see them coming together to want to create new stories and memories for themselves, and then the larger community, and then ultimately transmitting out to the teens. It's really, really powerful.
I love that you're doing that work, you know, at a time where, you know, this comes up for me around substance use, is folks will say, you know, they'll hear about somebody getting into recovery when they're 17 and they're like, wow, man, they're so young. And then I think about where I was at 17. I was like, I wish I had gotten into recovery at 17, you know? Like, I
Right.
kind of think that when you intervene and connect with people and like bring these things to somebody earlier in that journey, I'm not a believer that we have to hit bottom to change. You know,
Mhm.
I don't think we have to get to our darkest moment to transform. I think we can have a moment of perspective on our life, and sometimes another person can help you see that perspective, and that's an opportunity to shift. And it sounds
Mhm.
like that's what you're doing with youth, so that's great.
So, following up on that, in your book, Rise, Recover, and Thrive, you provide practical tools for recovery. Which practices could listeners try to immediately start to integrate into that embodied healing?
um I think for depends where you're at in that journey, you know, like if
Mhm.
it feels like you're white knuckling and just trying to hold on to life, you know, and things are really tough for you, I would just start seeking out um, ways to change. And it could be trying something new, like starting a exercise routine
Mhm.
and setting like a realistic goal, you know, like don't, if you're new to moving your body, which I was when I got sober, it
Mm.
was, you know, I thought, oh, I was going to start running 3 miles, and I still smoking a pack and a half of cigarettes a day, you know, and I ran like 300 yards, and I was like, I'm going to run 300 yards and then walk the rest of the mile, you
Yep.
know? And so setting a goal that's really, you know, a stretch, but achievable, and create some consistency there and try some new stuff, you know, like it's you know, my wife Kate, who's in recovery, also says that she just started saying yes to anything that seemed like a positive force in her
Mhm.
life. So
Yeah.
she, you know, dropped in at a jujitsu academy. She went to the Phoenix for the first time. She just started getting out there and trying different things. So I think that sort of like probing and seeking of like ways you could change, that's what got me to climbing for the first time, which
Mhm.
is ultimately what helped get me sober.
Mhm.
I also think like changing your routines, you know, like
Mm.
I'm a big believer in like 5 a.m. starts to your day, you
Mhm.
Mhm.
know, go to bed earlier, get up earlier, less
Yep.
screen time at night, you know, try to nurture your body with what you're putting in it food wise, and and get up with the sun,
Yeah.
and bring your workout or your meditation or your reading or whatever it is you're doing in the morning into your day instead of bringing your day into that activity, because the stress of your day, I think sometimes makes it harder for you to be present in those things. And then a really important thing, and I think this happens on the organization side too, for the Phoenix is sharing these things with people who have a shared vision for life, and finding folks that also want to get up at 5 in the morning instead of staying out till 5 in the morning,
Right.
is going to make a big difference in you being able to be successful in those things.
Yeah. Getting that rest that allows you to get up and go first thing. I fully subscribe to that model, and I feel the benefits, and I feel great from that. I'm glad that you found that too. So we need to go work out together.
Yeah, I'm
For
down for
sure.
sure.
And I'm
That's
also
great.
feeling rituals and routine, the importance of those two things, but also about mixing it up. One of the things I felt like in early recovery, it was like, and maybe it was just my perception of it, but it was so rigid and so linear. But again, that approach saved my life. But you talk about it, and whether it was in conversation, or forgive me if it was in your book or our conversation, but you challenge us to think in terms of creative destruction. So not just incremental change, but transformational leaps. And how has that mindset fueled innovation at your organization, at the Phoenix? And how might we apply it to broader mental health and recovery space?
Yeah, I mean, the term creative destruction really comes from sort of the entrepreneurial world, in the business world, but it's the idea that let's build something so much better today that what we had yesterday becomes obsolete. And I always use the analogy of sort of pay phones were to mobile phones to now to smartphones, or
Yeah.
you have typewriters to laptops to smartphones in your hand, that kind of idea. But in the private sector, I think people are driving creative destruction all the time. I think in the social sector and the nonprofit sector, we aren't really thinking in that way. And also, I think philanthropists aren't really funding in that way. So I think it's sort of a call to action to the philanthropic community, and a call to action to the social sector to think in that terms of creative destruction. And what helps me with that is this other business sort of term, which is 10x thinking versus 10%. And you could spend all day trying to improve your nonprofit or your business by 10%, but the thinking and the methods to improve it by 10x use a different part of your brain, right? You can't use the same strategies for 10x transformation. And so it forced us at the Phoenix to think about, how do we grow? How do we empower people to start Phoenix in communities across the country? And it really helped us go from an organization to a movement, to where anyone who's been touched by substance use, whether they experienced it themselves or somebody they love did, or they're just civically minded and they want to be part of the solution, they can start Phoenix as a volunteer. And we empower them with the model. We get them onto our digital platform, which is called New Form. And that's how people find events near them. And Phoenix is off and running. So I always say, like, download New Form. If you don't see Phoenix where you are, you can be the one that starts it, and you can be the solution you want to see in your community. And that is a way that we can reach real scale.
And you guys, the app is incredible. And if those of you that have been involved in the Endurant mission for the past few weeks or past few months, like literally what you've heard me say about how we're going about and setting up these Endurant communities, these Endurant teen communities, is like borrowed from our dear friend and mentor here, Scott. It's so powerful. Community is such an important piece. And as just before we turn the corner to community, I feel like that call, right? What role does purpose, turning this personal pain into a mission, play in helping move people from not just surviving addiction, but leading a life that's thriving?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot in that question. Like I
Yeah.
think um, so I just really quick want to touch on sort of the allegory of the cave by
Take
Plato.
your time, man. Yeah, we'd much
but
rather hear from you than whatever I have written on these cards.
but in the allegory of the cave, it's only 9 pages of philosophy, so most people can get through it, but I'm sure it's about a whole bunch of other things than the way I interpret it. But it talks about folks in a cave that are shackled and they're looking at this wall and they see the shadows from a fire that's behind them. They don't know it's a fire, but they just see these shadows on the wall and they believe that that is reality. And someday they're unshackled and they're able to walk around the cave and they all of a sudden have this enlightenment where they're like, oh, those things on the wall aren't real. The people still shackled believe it's real, but I see the world as it is. And then one day they're able to ascend up out of the cave and they say, now I see the world as it is. But their eyes aren't used to the light. So they adjust to the light over time and they see the world in its true state. And that person has a unique gift to be able to translate for the people that are still shackled looking at the wall what the world is, and when you're in that place where life is so dark and so overwhelming that it's just those shadows on the wall. If somebody told you it's a fire behind you and then there's this world above you that you don't even really know about, you'd think you'd have a hard time hearing it. But when somebody who has actually been there can translate it for you and they understand where you are in that moment, in that dark place, that's the real power, right? And so I think as somebody with lived experience, no matter whether it's you guys working with other families or it's Phoenix working with other people in recovery, or it's partners on the New Form app working with their constituents, like we're sharing that lived experience in a way that we can help somebody break out of those shackles and ascend out of that cave into the light and adjust to it, and I think that's powerful. And what's really powerful in there is that I think as humans, when we realize we have a unique gift that by sharing it with others, we are also lifted. That's where we find that life of purpose. And the person who we're helping almost immediately can then turn around and help the person behind them. So they also experience it. And that's how we're going to overcome the most challenging problems in our society is through that method, I think.
Yeah, I mean, the ripple effect of the shared experience, but someone who's, a little bit further down the road or has transcended the experience and turned it into something else and seen a new perspective that can reach out and extend that lifeline back, not from a theoretical perspective, but from a lived experience, and to say, I've been there, I've been in your shoes, I know what that's like, and I can offer you hope, and I can offer you a different end to your story, and together we can move through this, and I can help get you there. I mean, it's beautiful. It's community. It's how we move forward.
That's well said.
I am, so well said. And I'm so deeply moved by what you shared. I found myself a bit emotional. It also ties back to what you said earlier about we don't need to hit that bottom. We've hit the bottom in recovery, and Samara and I have hit the bottom in losing Anthony in the way that we did. And it cracked our hearts wide open, and we felt the call to something greater. And even recently we had this huge event this past week, and I feel like I'm changed, and like the light and the vision is so beautiful and different. And it's just, I also find it so liberating that folks don't have to wait till they're bottom. The things that we're doing in our organizations can help people see and transcend in this way without having to hit that bottom.
Well, and then taking your pain into purpose, and a dear friend and mentor, Tony Robbins, says, the secret to living is giving, and it's giving back. It's not just having this experience and saying, "Oh yeah, hey, there's hope." It's then stepping forth and saying, "Okay, I'm gonna offer this. I'm gonna be available. I'm gonna be of service to this community that needs help, that needs my love, that needs my energy and my attention. And oh, by the way, like you said, it's also helping me in that experience." So it becomes that beautiful flow, that dynamic exchange where giving and receiving happen simultaneously. And we as a species, as a community, evolve because we can depend on one another, we can trust one another, we can give hope to one another. It's really, I think, one of the secrets to life is tapping into that and understanding your place. And I'm not just meant to sit in a cubicle and push buttons. I'm really meant to be of service to mankind. And it's really beautiful. So thank you for illuminating that and sharing that with us.
Very much
Oh,
so.
I love how aligned we are on that. And, to me, the reason I think we are, and the reason this will resonate with so many people is that there's something in the human spirit and the human condition that sort of knows that this is a truth, right? That if we can use our gifts to help others, we find a life of purpose. And that if we can use our experience and even if that is hardship, to help others avoid or move through hardship, that we have that same sense of purpose. And even circling back to how we open the conversation, like that to me is also awe. That is to see the light come on for somebody who has felt pretty hopeless before. Is a really powerful thing to witness. And then to know, just because intrinsically it's in all people, that there is something then they can share with others that will do that and pay it forward and on, is really special.
Well, speaking of community, I mean, you've talked with us about the importance of a North Star vision and principles that guide the movement, almost like banks of a river. How has that framework kept Phoenix aligned as it's grown, and how might listeners apply that kind of thinking to their own lives and mission?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we have sort of having a North Star vision. Sometimes the North Star vision seems almost unobtainable, but it's a marker that's like way out there on the horizon. And I always think of sort of like an arrow, like even if it drops in low below that, you're still crushing it, like
Totally.
it's still great.
Yeah.
But because you're aiming so high, and then breaking that down into like a shorter term vision of how you move towards that, I think is key, whether it's in your life or in your organization. And then the principles, that you mentioned, that sort of idea, it's the banks of the river. It just sort of helps you get a clarity of like, here's how I approach the work, and here's where I will and will not go while I'm doing this work. And it also helps you frame partnerships, the same way that I talked about surrounding yourself with people who share that vision and those values. You want to do that as an organization. So I think I know that you two believe in the strength in people and the dignity of people and the innate gifts in people. And Phoenix also does. So if you and I partner together, then 1 + 1 is greater than 2. The impact we can create is greater because we're already seeing sort of further than we could alone. And I think that can happen in life, in your own journey. Surrounding yourself with people can happen for an organization. And then you just are those principles are that touchstone that you always go back to. It's the lens you see things through. And you say, like, it would be great to do this. It could be beneficial to the organization. Maybe we could raise a lot of money doing this. Does this really align with our principles? Probably not. So let's skip it, so let's go over to this other thing. It helps us do the economic thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And for us, the economic thinking is the transform life, the way we can best serve the people we serve to transform lives is our bottom line, and how we use our principles to make decisions.
Oh, man, I'm so personally grateful to be grounded and reconnected in that. Samara and I drove up from San Diego to this studio. It was a couple-hour drive, and we were saying to you before we got on, we had this huge event last week where it was a gladiator type competition, Tony Robbins Business Mastery, where we've raised now nearly $100,000. But more importantly than that were the connections that we made, the doors that are opening up from that. But even more important than that were the families who shared with us that Anthony's story resonated with them and they need help. They're concerned for their child in different ways. And so that's our priority. We're focusing on them. But what was also an interesting piece is there was a number of people coming from extraordinary places in their heart about ways that they felt were connective to the movement, and in the energy of it all felt in some ways connected to the movement, but also like, oh, wow, like I'm also finding this sort of dilution. So I like the visual of having these banks and the filter being the values, if we will, and to make sure, and maybe some of them aren't a fit, and maybe others are a fit for the greater vision down the line. But for me personally, that part was really helpful.
Yeah, and having what's our common denominator? What's our filtration system to say what's in and what's out, and perhaps passing off to resources, or bringing in. It's helpful to have distinction and clarity, because yes, we want to save the world, and we are two people creating a movement and a ripple effect, and we also in that want to be examples of managing your energy, prioritizing your own mental health, all of those things in the process. So it's important to live by example.
Yeah, I agree, and I think the um, one thing I'll add in a layer on top of that is what are your either unique gifts as a person or your capabilities as an organization. um, what are you sort of best at, and then you can aim that at your North Star vision within the sort of framework of those principles. But it also helps you realize who else you need alongside you. And that just circling back to our app, like the idea with New Form is that we can't solve all the unique challenges that people have on this healing journey. Phoenix does its piece as best as we can, but let's get other organizations. And now we're up to 100 other nonprofits on New Form. So the idea is that what you need when you need it is there for you. It might be trauma healing. It might be, She Recovers, a women specific recovery group that's on there. It might be Ben's Friends, which does recovery meetups for people in the food service industry. Or it might be Phoenix, or it might be all of those things together. So we can be focused and best at what we have a capability around, and we can bring alongside us those other capabilities. So they become a shared space where there's sort of a mutual benefit between those organizations to help the people we serve.
Yeah, that's great. Focusing on your strengths and then developing synergies with other organizations and help them, to cultivate and provide their strengths. I love that.
Right. And we had shared early on when we started this, like we didn't want to reinvent the wheel. And I'm just struck with so much of what you shared in there, and then also that formula of 1 + 1 = something greater than 2, 3 or more. And then selfishly, like Samara and I, like also on this write up, we're so glad our daughter is spending the night at a friend's tonight. So rather than go into the traffic and head back home, we're going to stay up here, because when we hold ourselves up, there's so much creativity and growth. But you just gave us what exactly to focus on as we figure out
the opportunities that we have from the success that we've had this last week, but we have to deliver on it. And being that there are only two people, so I'm just so grateful for the continued mentorship. And for our audience, I know with certainty this is helping you too, personally or with your businesses, or if you're involved in nonprofits as well. And one of the other things that I think brings all this together with what you guys are doing at the Phoenix is how you measure impact. And I'd love for you to speak about your CHIME framework: connectedness, hope, identity, meaning, empowerment. We're gonna have to borrow that, but how do we measure impact? This is profound. Please tell us how that works.
Yeah, and we added a B on the end, CHIME B, so belonging is another one that we've now
wow.
added there. So we'll have to probably come up with a new acronym here, I guess, but at some point. But I think those ideas of connectedness, hope, identity, meaning, purpose, belonging, those I think are actually the foundation of like self-actualization, of finding that life of purpose and meaning. And I don't mean like self-actualization like we're sitting on our yoga mats in prayer pose, like meditating, you know. It's more of I feel really deep in my core that there's a purpose for me to be here on earth, you know, and to be of service to others or to help the world in some way. It could be my business I started. It could be what the Phoenix does. It could be being a friend to others. But I think that idea of CHIME is something we should look at across our society, right? Like, and I think that what's special about Phoenix is we measure it not just in the people with the lived experience around mental health and addiction, but we also measure it with our volunteers and our allies and our supporters and our people that are just civically minded that want to help. And their CHIME scores are going up too. You know, so it's just, to me, it's sort of a proof that sometimes we're solutioning at the symptom level of a bigger issue.
Yeah.
When if we could go to the core and the why behind it, I think that's where we can aim something like CHIME to really create a solution that downstream will heal a lot of lives.
Yeah, it's a refreshing model, right? Go to the root cause. Let's not try to just, deal with the symptoms and
When also
going
that you're
right to the
measuring
core.
it in
Yeah.
every aspect of your business. So
Yeah.
not just the
That's so
outside
cool.
impact, but with your volunteers.
Right.
I mean,
And affiliates.
yeah, like,
Yeah.
oh my God, we have our agenda for after this, but it's it's so powerful for our listeners too. I mean, why wouldn't any, I was at this business event last week. Why wouldn't any business be implementing these as measures for their business impacts with how employees interact with one another? I mean, a mentor once told me when common sense becomes common practice, the extraordinary will happen. This seems to make good common sense.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there are a few companies out there using, this principled framework, and I think it's this idea that we want to help even our employees self-actualize, and that they too have unique gifts to share. And if we can put them in a place where they're expressing those gifts, that their sense of purpose at work is going to be different. So I think it could help, everything from the private sector to the social sector.
The human sector.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
So you've emphasized finding one's tribe. How can people embrace their authentic selves, find supportive communities, and discover strength through connection?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is why at the Phoenix that there is an ethos that we adhere to, and that same ethos is the terms of use of the New Form platform. And simplified, it is, we're here to lift each other up, not pull each other down. And that's just the simple lens you use. And I think like what's so special about that is it allows you to show up as all the parts of you, like we talked about before, even the parts that have been painful or or you carry shame around or whatever it is. But you also get to be more empathetic and loving to other people. And what's beautiful is when you start surrounding yourself with a place where that ethos is present, you start carrying that ethos into other parts of your life, and you just sort of think like, I'm here to lift others up, not pull them down, and you surround yourself with people that think the same way. But even if you're around somebody who doesn't, how you show up in that exchange is different. And I think it's desperately needed now, like I think that sometimes you can start to believe in your 24-hour news feed and your doom scrolling and all that other stuff that the world is on the precipice of something really dark. But when you reach underneath that, I think people want to be of service to each other. They want to help each other. They just sometimes don't know how to do that. And I think that's how we'll step back from that precipice.
It's so powerful. Even just talking to the teens recently, that's what they're talking about as well. Like that they've been shoehorned or pigeoned into this, like, we're not present, we're always on our phones, and they've been generalized. And what they're really actually seeking is belonging, how you added that B to CHIME. And also what you're saying about the tribes, when we can help not only teens and our young people, most importantly teens and our young people, but find their tribe, find their belonging, appreciate and understand their differences, and land in communities that acknowledge those differences and embrace and honor those differences. It's so powerful. And it also makes me think about what you're doing at the Phoenix in terms of these communities, right? People come to recover, but they leave with friends and communities. And we've focused on things like rock climbing, but I've experienced and seen where people are finding their tribe within the Phoenix community. So those rituals, those movements, those communities that resonate most with them, their tribes, which I personally believe is having possibly the most profound impact on their recovery, more so than whatever they're doing to abstain.
Yeah, I agree totally. And I think, one thing to mention there is it's, because we're really open to people contributing their unique gifts, Phoenix has become so much more than what it was for me. It's not just activities, it's art night, it's socials, it's photography, it's, jamming together, playing music. It's, it could be game night, it could be anything. So it's helped us create a bigger front door that can reach even more people. But what you talked about with young people is like, if anyone wants to really start thinking about driving creative destruction, it needs to be that generation, right? Because if we start thinking of it at that point, and you now have in front of you all of these tools of this digital world that can help you reach so much further, and now AI and all these other things, but we use them for a principled purpose to drive creative destruction to make the world better in some way, we could be in a whole different place a generation from now than we are today. And I think we're going to get there, because I think like I said, it's a human level thing. It's just the human condition that we want to be in supportive community. And I think we'll continue to try to make it wherever we can find it.
Yeah. And what I see there, I keep getting this visual of, we all have wounds and scars from pain and trauma of our past. And when we can see, oh, you have a wound and a scar too. And, deep down, we all have them. And when we recognize that in one another, it's like, oh, we are all human going through this experience that involves some pain and suffering. And maybe that brings us together, but then we can evolve together through these really positive and creative outlets of moving our bodies together, overcoming obstacles, taking on challenges, overcoming them, achieving new things in our lives together in a community where we're safe, where it's encouraged, where you have role models, you can see other people doing it. I think what I hear from the youth is that I want to be seen, I want to be understood and recognized. And when they can see themselves in someone else, it gives them that mirror, it gives them that reflection and that space and opportunity to say, oh, yeah, they're like me too. I belong here. I matter. My voice makes a difference. And together we can support one another. I think it's really great what you do, what we can do, this space and this opportunity to offer them that recognition and that we see them, that we see ourselves in them, that we can hopefully provide some examples, but also give them the space to create and to evolve. Because let the children run the show, right? Like they give them some tools, give them some outlet, and let them kind of take us forward too.
I love
And in
that.
many ways, they seem to know better than us. And I'm sure you are all seeing or hearing and feeling what we're feeling, the heart. And this man is so humble and is so focused on the outcome of healing, and himself and Phoenix just being the steward along the way. And my heart is just so full with everything that you've shared. And it reminds me of something that you once told us, and I feel like this is the perfect spot for it. Even if Phoenix doesn't fully change the way our country approaches addiction, we'll plow the road for those who come behind us. I mean, amazing. It's not your thing or the Phoenix's thing. It's so much bigger. So how do you hold that perspective, especially maybe, personally for myself, I'm just saying, like, when things are going really well and it feels like yours or Phoenix's, how do you hold on to that humbleness and that perspective that you have? And what can listeners learn about legacy when their impact feels far off or uncertain?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we at Phoenix sort of have an understanding of how big of an issue this is. Of how when you think about the root cause, um, it's so much bigger than just substance use. You could look at our,
Mhm.
like the correctional system. You could look at gun violence in our society. You could look at deaths of despair more broadly. You can look at all of these things, that even our political landscape, all these things that are really born from, I think, the same place. But in that idea of creative destruction, like we almost have to, we, we, as humans, I think, like to look for analogs of like something
Mhm.
to model after.
Yes. Yes.
Most of our analogs come from the private sector. You're like, oh, I'd love to be the Amazon of healing, for New Form,
That's
which we
right.
would love to do. But imagine someday if somebody looks at New Form and says, I would love for how we approach people experiencing homelessness and economic lack of opportunities, um, to have something that sort of have New Form as the analog. Like we start to find the analogs in
Mhm.
the social sector and in our society and the way we're lifting each other up versus looking to people that are sort of focused more on profit to be the analog. And to me, that's what it's about. Like Phoenix is trying to drive creative destruction. We are doing things, you know, building this marketplace of healing with New Form. We are empowering volunteers across the country. We have a risk profile that is, if we have an opportunity to go help people, we go and we figure out how we get there on the way, and other people could say, you need to do market analysis and you need to look at this and all these things in a community before you scale there. And sometimes that analysis can be paralysis,
Mhm.
For sure.
but you know, and I know, and many of the people listening know that on the other end of that outreach from a community or a place or people is somebody we might be able to save their life if we get to them. So we are going to go and we will figure out how we get there on the way. And that's why I think, Phoenix may really change the way the country's approaching addiction. But to the point you lifted up, we sure as hell are going to plow the road for the people that come behind us to think differently, to break down mental models that are keeping people sick, or thinking that we can incarcerate our way out of addiction, or that treating the symptoms will somehow solve it. Or, when you look at sort of public health solutions overall, like when people are sick from drinking the water, you go up to where the river starts to solve it. You don't
Right.
keep sort of pulling them out of the water. And Phoenix is trying to do that. And hopefully people will be inspired by that and join the Phoenix movement, but also come up with even better ways to do it years from now.
Phoenix is doing that, and
Yeah.
you've inspired Samara and I personally. And in fact, Phoenix and you are the analog for our movement, and know that with certainty. It's so powerful.
It's so
It's hard.
inspiring,
Yeah,
and
it's
it's
so
so
inspiring.
refreshing.
Yeah.
So thank you for pouring your heart and soul into that mission and to sharing it with us and our audience, our community. It's really refreshing, like I said, to just take such a creative approach to it and to step forth into your power in that way and to transform the pain and trauma of your past into such a powerful movement. So we really acknowledge and we recognize the difference that you're making in our community, in the world. So thank you so much,
Well,
Scott.
thank you all for doing the same with Endurant, and to, I have no doubt as like the neighborhoods in New Form expand to what's adjacent to to those resources, that someday there'll be a robust Endurant community in there, and that people will be able to
Without
connect.
question.
And what you need at 2 days into healing and 20 years into healing are different. So having those resources there, and eventually it'll be a place just for all of us to show up. And sometimes you're showing up to be of service, and sometimes you're showing up because you need a little extra support.
Right.
But that's what real community is. That's, we're helping each other some days, and other days you're helping me, and that's what it's about.
Yeah, giving and receiving. I love it. I have a question for you.
Oh, you do
go
too?
ahead.
Well,
Go
okay.
ahead.
I feel like I have a final question to kind of ask, but so you
Okay,
go
I'm
ahead.
going to ask mine and then you ask yours.
We
So
just don't want to let you go, Scott. Sorry.
No,
we
this
love
is
having
great.
you. Thank you. So what does being endurant mean to you?
I mean, I think that, to me, I can't help but go back to my big mountain climbing, days, where, where in big mountains, like where the air is thin and it's hard to breathe, and they're steep, and you've been on them for days, and it feels insurmountable, that you just get focused in that moment, and you like hear the crunch of the snow and ice under your crampons, and you kick your feet in, and you take a step up, and you take a few breaths, and you kick your foot in again, and you take a step up, and you take a few breaths, and you do it again and again. And that's how you climb mountains. And I think that's the same for all these other complex issues. That's how we'll get through it. That's how we'll change it. That's how we'll help people. That's where more people will come alongside us, and they'll just kick their foot in and take one more step with us.
Yeah, I don't. That question is a far more succinct and powerful question than what I had in mind. We're so grateful to have you, Scott. Yeah, thank you so much, man.
Thank you.
Yeah, just you mean the world to us, and
thank you guys for what you're doing, and for lifting this stuff up for others, and we're just getting started. So this is just the beginning of all the stuff we'll do together. So appreciate you both very much, and look forward to what's next.
Us too.
You too. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Scott.
Thank you for listening to the Endurant Show. If this conversation moved you, please follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. To view the conversations, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. And to be a part of the community, follow us at Endurant Movement. And lastly, if you feel called to support the movement and help us ensure no teen ever feels alone again, visit endurantmovement.org to learn more, and if you can, make a donation. Together we can create lasting change, one conversation, one connection at a time.